No spin, no bias, no censorship. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, after being caught out over Basic Instinct Gate and beers with Keir, can we trust Angela Rayner? I'll hit back at the recent deification of the Labour deputy and the desperate MSM's inability to keep its story straight in my digest next. Then I'll get the thoughts of my bank holiday superstar panel, Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and broadcaster and campaigner Lalani Dowdy. Plus, would a Labour Lib Dem pact be a disaster for Brits? Journalist Angela Epstein and Daily Mirror associate editor Kevin Maguire look ahead to this week's local election showdown in the clash at 9:20. And 25 years after he swept to victory, will Tony Blair's backing in an official ad help or hinder Keir Starmer? We'll debate at 10:30. Elsewhere on the show, why on earth did Jubilee organisers cast a Singaporean dancer to play our Queen? Constantine Kisson breaks down this audacious example of colourblind casting in Uncancelled at 10:40. How can ITV claim to be kind after kicking one of its most loyal stars to the curb with COVID on the horizon as part of their woke takeover? Dancing on Ice's brutally honest judge Jason Gardner tells how that behind-the-scenes toxicity inspired him to leave society behind as the pandemic took hold. He's taking aim at the TV and medical elite at 10:20. As this intelligent young man's reasoned argument about the harm caused by lockdown is literally laughed at by a BBC audience.
I think what it shows that by Boris Johnson breaking the rules was that they were absurd in the first place and that we should never have gone into lockdown.
How do we undo more than 2 years of MSM brainwashing? Neil Oliver was as mortified as me by that clip, summing up everything that's wrong with hysteria-ridden Beeb Britain. He's the outsider at 9:45. And why are some hospitals still banning bedside visitors on COVID grounds? Positive Professor Carol Sikora investigates this cruel policy that must be brought to a swift end at 9:30. Is positive discrimination to make the Tory party 50% female the correct solution to the Westminster sleaze scandal? And as it attempts to refute accusations of bias, Channel 4 hosts a totally neutral debate about the sale of Channel 4.
Don't be commissioning people, based in cities like Leeds, where a lot of production companies depend on public service commissions.
Completely untrue. I'm sorry, Christian. You just don't understand what's going on at all.
More on those stories coming up in the Media Buzz later tonight. You'll also get your first look at tomorrow's newspapers throughout the show, and I'll crown the first greatest Britain and Union jackass of the week at 10:50. This is Dan Wootton tonight. Let's go. Just one thing first, though. Remember last week when I sent my producer Caroline Gawley to probe Labour MPs about Keir Starmer's obsession with Partygate over the cost of living crisis, and Rupa Huck, the MP for Ealing Central and Acton, literally bolted down the pavement to avoid the question. Look.
Can I just quickly ask you?
Well, the hilarious footage shocked viewers, while Rupa herself directly responded to the clip, liking a tweet that basically claimed we didn't ask for an interview in a, quote, professional way, and suggested she was running for her safety. Utter rubbish, of course. Watch this.
Hi, Caroline from GBNews. Can I just quickly ask? I'll ring way back.
Nothing unprofessional about that. Well, my team has approached Rupa Huck the proper way with an interview request about summer, and so far, radio silence. But this is your chance, Rupa. Come on in. Now, my special digest on Labour's lies and hypocrisy after Angela Rayner's story collapsed. That's in just one moment. Then my superstar panel take me on. Tonight, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and social commentator Lalani Dowdy. But first, the news with Polly Middlehurst.
Good evening. Our top story tonight. At least 300 people have been intercepted on up to 9 small boats in the English Channel so far today. Yesterday, the Ministry of Defence confirmed 254 people arrived in 7 small boats. It follows 11 days without crossings, with strong winds and choppy seas believed to have been a factor. A survey of asylum seekers in northern France, conducted by the charity Care for Calais, has found 3/4 of refugees would still try to reach the UK, despite the possibility they could be sent on to Rwanda. The Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer says an international coordinated criminal response is now needed to tackle the problem.
I've worked on international criminal organisations before when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. I know what can be done if you've got teams working together across Europe, all the way along those routes, absolutely bearing down on these criminal gangs and working very closely with the French authorities as well.
Well, in news away from home, the port city of Odessa in southwestern Ukraine has been hit by a rocket strike, and it's caused death and multiple injuries, according to the local governor there. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian fighter says civilians still remain trapped in the steel plant in the besieged southern port city of Mariupol, despite some people being safely evacuated yesterday. Officials also say Russian forces have resumed heavy shelling of the area, which continued after buses requiring the evacuees left. Mariupol resident Alisa says she is relieved to have been making it out.
It was a risk. It was a risk, but they wanted to get from Mariupol, so we decided that it's worth it. And I have other relatives still in Mariupol. Perhaps my uncle is in Azovstal. He is in the forces. So I don't know where he is still. So we're waiting.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Navy has released footage of what it claims shows a drone strike hitting 2 Russian high-speed patrol boats. The Raptor-class boats are said to have been destroyed at dawn near Snake Island in the Black Sea. Moscow has not yet responded to the claim, and GBNews can't independently verify the video. Now, one of Britain's most wanted men has been arrested after trying to fly to Portugal using a fraudulent passport. Alex Mail from Weston-super-Mare in Somerset is accused of drug trafficking and money laundering. He's been on the run since December 2020, when he skipped bail and fled to Spain. The National Crime Agency says he was detained at Lisbon Airport on Saturday after arriving on a flight from Turkey, where he'd been refused entry. Here, the Prime Minister's considering giving housing association tenants the right to buy homes they currently rent. The Telegraph newspaper reports that Boris Johnson has asked officials to draw up plans to help young people struggling to get on the property ladder. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+. You're with GB News. And now it's time for Dan Wootton Tonight.
The deification of Angela Rayner these past 7 days has been nothing short of sickening. In the worst example of London liberal media groupthink in a long time, the potty-mouthed political redhead who loves referring to all Tories as scum miraculously transformed before our very eyes into a hapless damsel in distress, the victim of the worst type of sexism, classism and any other ism going, let's be honest. The BBC, ITV News, Sky News and the rest of the usual suspects stoked faux horror that this shy and retiring political victim had been outrageously accused of using her risque, leg-revealing Commons outfit to distract the Prime Minister by uncrossing and crossing her leg Sharon Osbourne style during PMQs. But over the weekend, that narrative collapsed. Not that you'd know it if you were tuned into any of those aforementioned outlets. The desperate, perverted smears, as Rayner later called them, were first spread by her. Whoopsie-daisy. Yep, 4 MPs witnessed on a chilly evening in January Rayner saying, "I like to do my Sharon Stone trick. I cross and uncross my legs and give him a flash of my ginger," well, you know. I'm not even going to go there. Heaven forbid that journalists dare to report what bile Rayner actually spewed to Tory MPs during a particularly unseemly session on the Commons terrace. Instead, the week ended with left-wing columnists in the Daily Mirror calling for misogyny to become a hate crime. Because we appear to be existing in some sort of post-truth universe where the prevailing media narrative cannot be disturbed by, inconvenient facts. Hence why Rayner can continue tweeting about Boris Johnson being a sexist this Bank Holiday Monday, knowing that she's got away with her week-long deception and manipulation of the gormless British broadcast media who swallowed her provable lies because they fit an exhausting but transparent woke agenda. Rayner's hysterical growls of indignation were not the first time that Labour's lies have been well and truly exposed in the course of the past 7 days either. It has also emerged that Rayner was in attendance at this infamous Bears with Care Hartlepool party at the Durham Miners Hall last April, where Starmer downed beers and scoffed Indian takeaways with colleagues in an obvious breach of lockdown regulations at the time. Now, in theory, I have zero issue with what Labour's leadership team and their pals did late that night after a hard day of campaigning. By now, any sane individual should see the lockdown restrictions inflicted on Brits in varying degrees for 2 years were nonsensical, impractical, inhumane and virtually impossible to follow. But the problem for Labour is that for the past few months, they have consistently gone on the record to state that Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak must both resign for even the smallest breach, given they were asking the rest of the population to follow these cruel regulations.
Was there, then his position's untenable. We don't need an investigation. He needs to go.
The Prime Minister has been forced to hand an apology to Her Majesty the Queen. Isn't he ashamed that he didn't hand in his resignation at the same time? So since he acknowledges the ministerial code applies to him, will he now resign? The British public aren't fools. They never believed a word of it. They think the Prime Minister should do the decent thing and resign. The ministerial code says that ministers who knowingly mislead the House should resign. Why is he still...
Of course, Labour didn't just back the lockdown regulations. They were regularly calling for even tougher measures to be introduced. So that put Starmer and Rayner in a potentially career-ending position. Why the hell should they stay in post when their breach of lockdown regulations was far more egregious than that committed by Boris or Rishi, who were presented with a birthday cake for the PM which never left its Tupperware container and consumed no alcohol at the daytime event for which they have received a fixed penalty notice? In fact, Starmer actually wants us to believe that he briefly broke for beers and takeaways at 10 p.m. on a Friday night and then returned to work afterwards. Let's not forget, the vile rules at the time stated you must not socialise indoors except with your household or support bubble. What's more, the Labour Party lied about Rayner's attendance at the event in question and have spent the past year trying to cover up the circumstances of the gathering, the exact crime they believe should see Boris deposed as Prime Minister, plunging the country into chaos in the midst of a European war and a once-in-a-generation cost of living crisis. And the moment Partygate began crashing down around a beer-swigging Starmer and Randy Rayner's Basic Instinct story collapsed, guess what happened? This.
I think it's rather depressing that as people head to the polls, you're raising an issue where there is no police investigation, where there was no breach of the rules. And that basically is what you're questioning me on this morning. We could be talking about cost of living. We could be talking about rising inflation. We could be talking about a windfall tax.
Yeah, so Labour's leadership are now pretending they haven't just spent the past 5 months banging on about Partygate ad nauseum and laughably claim they want to focus on the issues that really matter. And by and large, and this is what's most disturbing, the mainstream media has swallowed such an obvious mischaracterisation of what's really been going on. Why linger on these scandals now the original narrative has collapsed, when there's bigger sticks with which to bash Boris Johnson and the Tory party days out from the local elections? All I'm asking for is consistency. If Partygate And Rayna's Basic Instinct scandal were considered the biggest story by these news organisations when the narrative was running in favour of the Labour Party. It shouldn't be banished from the news agenda the moment the facts tip in favour of the Tories. Now, look, Rayna is a highly entertaining politician who clearly despises the leader of no opposition, Keir Starmer, and is out to replace him as soon as humanly possible. But the truth is not her strong point. So treating her as a celebrity with softball interviews and unquestioning reportage is a disservice to voters. And it's actually sexist in itself, because it suggests a senior Labour politician with her eyes firmly fixed on becoming Prime Minister should be held to a lower standard simply because she's a woman. That's the type of misogyny I'd expect Rayna to rail against. But to respond now, my superstar panel. The Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the broadcaster and campaigner Lilani Dowding. Carol Malone. She has been caught red-handed.
Completely. You know, I think Angela Rayner is one of the main reasons that Labour is now unelectable. I think anybody with half a brain looks at her and can't imagine her with any kind of power. They don't want to run government. However, what was really awful about what happened this week is she used the smear of misogyny, which many women do suffer from in the workplace, to try and make political capital. I mean, you know, she called this a desperate, perverted smear. This was a smear put out by her not once but twice. Once in January, where she laughed uproariously about it, and again on the House of Commons terrace. And you know, Angela is always banging on about posh Tory boys and how they don't like her because she's a single mum and she was brought up poor and she's got no formal education. You know, this is just, you know, self-pitying tosh. Tories have never used that against her, but she is constantly using stuff against the Tories, pretending that they smear her. They don't smear her at all. And this wasn't a smear. This was something she put into the public domain, not once, but twice. And you're talking about Beergate. You know, why didn't she fess up? Last week or before that? Why didn't she say, hey, I was there? Because you know what? She put out social media on the fact that she was there. And what I find incredible about Labour in all of this is that they have denied until the video proof was there, and then they have to admit the truth. They have done far worse than Boris did on the day of his... This is far worse. There were allegedly 30 people in that room.
Alcohol being swigged, Indian takeaways being consumed.
The curry man who said he brought curry for 30 people suddenly changed his mind today. He was never there. Well, who got to him? Anyway, there you go.
Benjamin Butterworth, how on earth can we trust a word that comes out of Angela Rayner's potty mouth after these two incidents?
Well, it's strange. Your story missed a part of where the Basic Instinct line came from, because it was a member of your superstar panel who first said it.
And she spoke about that very proudly on the show last week. I presume you're talking about Amanda Plattel.
I am. It was Saturday, 8th of January, where she wrote it, and that's what Angela Rayner was joking about afterwards. And so, you know, it wasn't somehow her own idea. She was being light-hearted about something that had been written by a columnist.
Let me tell you, Amanda Plattel never used the two G words, ginger G, in her column, Benjamin Butterworth.
I know. I read her column earlier from the 8th of January, so that's where it started. And so, you know, it started in the Daily Mail, and then they made it into a story themselves, saying an MP source had said it. Well, you know, it started in their own pages, and then they claimed to have investigated.
If you're on the House of Commons terrace and 4 other MPs have heard you say those words and have reported that deserves to be reported. That is the journalist's job, and particularly a political editor's job, to report what he hears, and that's exactly what Glenn Owen.
OK, so that's the first lie. Then you've got the second lie, Benjamin Butterworth, which is about beers with Keir. Now, you've been calling on Boris Johnson to resign for weeks. Will you also have the balls to put your money where your mouth is tonight and say that Keir Starmer should also resign for such an egregious rule breach? Because you were so horrified by Boris and his cake. So horrified.
But you know full well that it wasn't Boris Johnson and his cake.
No, just answer my question.
No, because Keir Starmer quite clearly didn't break the rules, and that's what the law has said. So when you're saying that he breached it, that's not what's happened, because...
He did breach.
Because also...
He did breach the rules.
He didn't, and also
you're talking about... He breached 2 sets of rules. He breached the COVID rules, and he breached the electioneering rules, which said do not gather indoors.
And he lied about it as well.
He did not, and he was at a work event when he was doing that. And also, by the way...
Excuse me, Boris was at a work event. Boris was about to go into a cabinet meeting.
Boris Johnson wasn't at a work event when he had wine and cheese in the garden.
No, we're talking about what he's received a fixed penalty notice for. Lilani, come in here.
So, Labour Party have been campaigning constantly to, get the Met Police to investigate. And why aren't Durham Police investigating
exactly.
what's going on? But he did, though. We've seen the photos.
We saw the video.
You've seen the footage.
And they keep denying it
and it wasn't a breach of the rules.
Do you know what? You'll lose a lot of credibility here, because how can you say there's one rule for Boris and Rishi and then a complete other rule for Keir? Did you not see the video of him swigging beer?
Keir Starmer's actually worse, because he pushed for schools to close, he pushed for teachers to stay at home, he pushed for tougher lockdowns. They lied for 3 months, and they pushed to invest Partygate. And now he's saying, let's
not talk about it.
And how strange that case that you're not talking about the fact that just days later, Boris Johnson gathered in Durham with no face masks, indoor at a pub, stood next to 10 members of his staff. If you don't have a problem
with that... But I'm not calling for Boris to resign.
Why are you deflecting?
Because
neither
of those things, at the time they happened and the context they happened, were breaches of the rules. Neither Keir Starmer stopping in Mary Foy MP's office, nor Boris Johnson with his staff.
Then, Benjamin. I think you need a reading comprehension lesson, because if you can possibly say that there is any excuse for Keir Starmer swigging beers in the context of the rules, which, by the way, I think the rules were
proven at all. It's not been proved. That's the number that's suggested.
And you tell a lie that Angela Rayner was there. You tell a lie that Angela Rayner was there. She was in the building 2 hours earlier.
Keir Starmer and the party said they didn't know she was there. Her election...
That'd be because it was several hours earlier.
Her elections... No.
It was.
It was within 20...
The Daily Mail's own story.
Well, let me finish my sentence. The Beergate, it was within 20 minutes of Starmer making his Zoom thing. Angela Rayner did hers. They were in the same room at the same time, within the same hour period.
But you know what? I actually think this is great. I actually think this whole situation is great, because what it's done is expose the complete hypocrisy of the Labour Party, the complete hypocrisy of left-wing journalists like Benjamin Butterworth, who are now exposed live on this show for wanting Boris to go for breaking the rules and Keir Starmer to stay, even though he broke exactly the same rules. So I'm glad. The hypocrisy is now exposed. We can all move on from this ridiculous call for Boris Johnson to resign. Lilani Dowding, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, my superstar panel, and they are here all night. But coming up, as some hospitals seem to be banning visitors, claiming COVID as the excuse, how do we get some humanity back into our healthcare? Positive Professor Carol Sikora investigates at 9:30. But up next, would a Labour Lib Dem pact be a disaster for Brits as the local election showdown looms? Journalist Angela Epstein and Daily Mirror Associate Editor Kevin Maguire go head-to-head in the clash. But I want to know what you think. What do you think of the idea of Ed Davey and Starmer teaming up? Dan at gbnews.uk. Tweet me at gbnews. We've got our poll running there too. The results after the break.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking mostly cloudy to start the day, with patchy light rain and a little hill fog. Let's take a look then at the details. It'll be a mild and rather cloudy start to Tuesday across southwest England, but it will be mostly dry. There'll be sunny spells and also a little patchy mist. The southeast will also have a cloudy start with limited bright spells. The cloud thick enough for a little light rain or drizzle. South Wales will start with some bright or sunny spells, but it will be rather cloudy towards the north and east, where there might be some rain. It'll be cloudy and a bit murky in the northwest of England, some patchy hill fog and some light rain or drizzle, but brightening up through the morning. Damp and murky conditions, though, across the northeast of England on Tuesday morning, patchy coastal hill fog and light rain or drizzle at times. And a similar story for southern Scotland, a grey and damp start with low cloud and hill fog lightly, the cloud thick enough for patchy rain and light drizzle. Northern Ireland having a drier start, but it'll also be rather cloudy with the odd bright spell, some patchy mist or fog possible, but dry for most. The cloud breaking in southern areas to sunny spells and scattered showers, remaining cloudy though, with patchy rain in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Neil Oliver and the Positive Professor coming up, but time now for The Clash. The Conservative Party chairman, Oliver Dowden, has accused Labour and the Lib Dems of working together in a new electoral pact to damage the Tories in the local upcoming elections. Dowden's comments came after a leaked Tory analysis showed that the Labour Party is standing candidates in just 61% of council seats in the South West, compared to the 97% of candidates they stood in the same region in 2018. The analysis also revealed that in the North East and North West, parts of England where Labour has deep historical roots, the Lib Dems are also standing fewer candidates. Now, can you imagine the nightmare of a Labour-Lib Dem coalition? I got thinking today it would look as little something like this.
We made a promise before the election that we would vote against any rise in fees under any circumstances, but that was a mistake.
Let me show you.
Today I am standing here as your candidate for Prime Minister.
And I declare that Amy Callaghan is elected to serve in the United Kingdom Parliament as the member for the Eastern Bartonshire County constituency.
How much would 10,000 police officers cost?
Well, if we recruit the 10,000 police men and women over a 4-year period, we believe it'll be about £300,000.
£300,000 for
Sorry,
10,000 police officers? What are you paying them?
No, I mean...
We cannot get any worse than a bunch of scum, homophobic, racist, misogynistic, absolute vile, banana republic, vile, nasty.
What is wrong with the phrase woman, adult, human, female? What's wrong with that?
Well, I mean, the phrase actually doesn't really encapsulate the debate, to be honest. That's what's the problem with it.
Woman can have a penis.
Nick, I'm not... I don't think we can conduct this debate with, you know...
Sorry, have I offended you in some way?
No, it's just... No, I just...
So, would a Labour-Lib Dem pact be even more of a disaster for Brits? I want to hear your views on that. That's just the curtain raiser. Send your thoughts to dan@gbnews.uk. Tweet me at GBNews and vote in our Twitter poll there too. But to help you make up your mind, I'm joined by the journalist and broadcaster Angela Epstein and the associate editor for the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire. Now, Kevin, I'm sure you think I'm being unfair because you're right behind this idea of a pact, aren't you?
Yeah, Dan, I liked you. You said more of a disaster, admitting that the current government is a
No, don't even go there.
In that generational cost of living crisis, what's happening to the NHS, Partygate, because the Prime Minister has been fined at first lawbreaker. But look, Dorsey Dowden overlooked the fact that Labour are standing more candidates in these local elections than the Conservatives. Labour 5,324, the Conservatives 5,273. So there isn't a pact with the Liberal Democrats. I personally think there probably should be to unite the progressive vote, but also Dorsey Dowden should acknowledge that from 2010 to 2015, his party was in a coalition government with the Lib Dems. Then from 2017 to 2019, it had a deal with the Democratic Unionists in Northern Ireland to stay in power. Then at the 2019 election, it had a deal with Nigel Farage and the Brexit Party, which didn't stand candidates against the Conservatives. So it's all like chaos now. You know it is. Parties get exhausted in power. You look at what's happening with the MP in Tiverton, Honiton, who was looking at porn, but he said he really fancied tractors. You look up in Wakefield, the Tory MP there was having to stand down because he was found guilty of molesting a teenager. Sleaze is back in a John Major level. Labour and other parties aren't blemish-free, but it's particularly infecting the Tories. You look at what's happening to the economy, you look what's happening to public services, and before you go on about if you have a pact and you get to an election, you have a coalition, there'll be broken promises. Look what Boris Johnson is doing with his manifesto from 29. He's shredded it with a national insurance increase, tax rises, including corporation tax, cutting international development when he would stick it. You could go on and on and on. Now, if Britain wants change, it's probably going to have to be the anti-Tory parties, and there's a majority of Brits who are anti-Tory somehow working together. Perhaps not formally.
I don't think Brits want that. I don't think Brits actually can stomach the idea of a Starmer, Rayner, Davies, Sturgeon, hodgepodge. I mean, Angela, that is a nightmare.
It's an absolute nightmare on so many levels. I mean, it's classic Kevin that he makes the point by pulling the Tories apart rather than making the point of what the Labour and Lib Dems would do for Britain. Remember, this progressive vote, if it exists, is not some kind of bunch of lard that you smear here and there where you feel like putting it. You know, we're people. We go into the ballot box and we think about what's going to be good for us. I say lard. I mean, I'm also a long-haired, ginger-headed, northerner called Angela with a big gob. So, I should really be aligning myself with Angela Rayner, but I don't. But that's for a whole different conversation. My beef, two levels. First of all, setting aside that we don't need the instability of huge change at the moment. Keir Starmer, it's a cliche, couldn't run a bath, never mind run a party. And my beef with him goes back to between 2015 and 19. This was a man who campaigned robustly to put Jeremy Corbyn at number 10. Now, I don't just say that because of the anti-Semitism. I'm Jewish. That was a very personal, deep hurt on so many levels. We don't need to cover Corbyn now. If that's where his judgment is kind of focused, then that's somebody who really doesn't understand what the British people
Kevin,
want.
he wanted Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister, and he also actively campaigned and led the charge to overturn the biggest democratic vote in British history in Brexit. Kevin, I don't think the British public are just going to forget that in a hurry. I really don't.
Dan, just point out that John Major got more votes than were voted to take Britain out of the European Union. So when you say it's the biggest democratic vote, I think you've twisted it, and turnouts have been a lot bigger in previous elections too. However, you're quite right. He did want to be back in the European Union, didn't want Brexit, but he's reconciled himself now to the fact Britain is out, and his slogan is "Make Brexit work." There's no way he would take Britain back in. It'll be very interesting to see what the Liberal Democrats promise in their manifesto, because that could be a point of contention between the two. And on Jeremy Corbyn, you're quite right. He wanted him to be prime minister because he thought he would be better than Boris Johnson. And given Boris Johnson's record, you can make a credible case.
Kevin, can you say that, given you look at Corbyn's position now, for example, on international relations, and you look at how well Boris has handled this war in Ukraine? Angela, I mean, it's just crazy to suggest that Corbyn could be a better prime minister.
Kevin, I know you get very excited, but how would we defend ourselves if Corbyn was, I mean that in the nicest possible way, if Corbyn was in power? And, you know, we've had Putin saber-rattling with nuclear weapons. Obviously, we don't want to see it escalate, and that we're hopefully, please God, that's just rhetoric. But, you know, with Corbyn or the likes of the Lib Dems and Labour in number 10, we'd have what we're going to fight them with, you know, water pistols. And the other thing that I think we're forgetting is, how are they going to get on? Only 3 or 4 days ago, the Labour Party and the Lib Dems had an almighty spat about the so-called placing of online adverts on the internet, Facebook, because they suggested that the Lib Dems wanted to decriminalise drugs, and it was this huge almighty row that broke out. Labour Party came out and said, "What are the Lib Dems saying this for? They should be looking at their record on crime and their policies on crime." They're not even getting on when they're not even in power together. So how on earth can you get a completely confused British electorate in such uncertain times, with all the things we know about, stomach some kind of, you know, pact?
Kevin, how do you respond to that?
Even suggest the two parties would get on.
Has Angela noticed the disputes and the spats and the occasional civil war within the governing Conservative Party?
Yeah, but we're not talking about the Tories.
The Chancellor was plotting to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, and all of a sudden
we're talking about Labour and the Lib Dems and how on earth they would form a coalition government. That's what we're talking about.
What, Labour and the Lib Dems?
You only defend by attacking.
It will depend, actually, Dan, on the maths. Now, if you look at Labour to form a majority would require a bigger swing in the vote than Tony Blair got in 1997. I suggest that will not be going to happen. Exactly. I accept that will not be happening. And there's that big block of Scottish votes, the SNP. Labour are going to take generations to get back, if they ever get back. So Labour's task, Keir Starmer's task, is one, to deprive the Conservatives of a majority, then two, attempt to become the biggest party, then three, see if you could form a coalition or you rule as a minority party. But this idea, that would be somehow really, really unstable. And we have stability now. It's for the birds. It's just not the case. There is no stability now. I remember David Cameron in 2015 tweeted, "Britain faces a simple and inescapable choice: stability and strong government with me, or chaos with Ed Miliband." Well, all we got was chaos with David Cameron, who thought he wouldn't get a majority, would have to rely on the Lib Dems. He didn't want his European referendum. He had to have it. He lost it, and he went. And since then, the country's been in utter turmoil. So
Angela,
you can say a coalition will be lots of pushing and shoving, and there would be some instability. There's no question of that. But there's huge instability now in a governing party with a supposed 80-seat majority.
Angela, final word.
Here's a very fundamental question. What does Keir Starmer stand for? Because I'm baffled.
No one knows.
I mean, when it comes...
No one knows.
Because when it comes to all the big calls, we know all the things he doesn't want to do. Oh, stay at home. Oh, maybe we should have another lockdown. You know, it's a bit like a kind of not the 9 o'clock news sketch for our older viewers. Whereas at least on the big calls, at times of an unprecedented... You know, we had a pandemic. I was just talking about it today when I was saying to somebody, did we really go through that? When you see people milling around and thronging in shops and out and about, he made the big calls and he got them right. The vaccine, pioneering the vaccine program, not going into the Christmas lockdown, all the things.
Exactly. And he got a lot wrong. He got a lot wrong, and no one is trying to say that Boris Johnson was perfect throughout the pandemic. But the idea that a horrific coalition of Starmer, Rayner, Davey and Sturgeon would be better from Britain, well, I think that idea is for the birds, but fascinating. Thank you for having it.
Starmer summed up what he stands for in prosperity, security and respect, which it really means economic prosperity and social justice.
Thank you, Kevin.
Jeremy
for clearing
Corbyn.
it up. Shame that he can't. The associate editor for the Daily Mirror, Kevin Maguire, too. So who do you agree with on this? Well, Matthew on Twitter says the UK would be a global laughingstock with a lab-lib coalition. From Adam, it's hard to be worse than Boris and his fake Tories, raising taxes on the working poor, green initiatives and billions on wasteful government spending we don't need. Sounds like Labour. And from Marcus, it would be a disaster. It would be the end of Britain. And your verdict is now in. 83% of you agree with me that a Labour-Lib Dem pact would be a disaster for the country, while 17% of you say it could be OK. Now, coming up, as lockdown sceptics are laughed down during the BBC's Question Time, how do we help the victims of MSM brainwashing? Neil Oliver sums up everything wrong with hysteria-ridden Britain in The Outsider at 9:45. But first, why are some hospitals still banning bedside visitors on COVID grounds? Positive Professor Carol Sikora investigates why the inhuman policy has been allowed to continue. That's next.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Neil Oliver and Constantine Kisson coming up, but now time for our positive professor Carol Sikora. And despite the pandemic being all but finished in this country, some NHS trusts in England are still implementing total bans on hospital bedside visitors under what critics have called immoral restrictions on patients and their loved ones. The draconian rules imposed by 9 trusts completely laugh in the face of common sense and at worst are causing pain, hurt and anger to thousands of people who can't support hospitalised friends and family in their darkest hours. Even official NHS guidance in Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland is more accommodating. And if that wasn't bad enough, staggeringly, almost half of English trusts still maintain policies so strict that they flaunt official NHS England guidance that says patients can have at least 2 visitors a day. The NHS said in a statement that in line with the latest guidance, NHS trusts should facilitate patient visits and measures should already in place for this to be done safely. Clearly, these fear-based pen pushers at NHS trusts across England, probably all paid eye-watering salaries, are not getting the message. Carol, it's not right that we have a postcode lottery of compassion that means frail, vulnerable and dying patients are still denied the gentle touch of a hand or a soothing voice as they languish in a hospital bed, is it?
Situation there. The centre has issued an edict, relaxed, but some tin pot administrators around the country are able to do their own thing in different hospitals. When I go around our clinics, and we don't have beds there, we have the cancer clinic, and I look at the notices on the wall, I say, take them down, it's all over, take it down. How long do we have to go on with this, what I call the COVID theatre, with sanitation everywhere, people wearing masks, people checking temperatures, all this sort of stuff? It is over. If we don't say it's over, it'll never end, Dan. That's the worry about it. And just to go back to how we started this, it's so important that relatives can see their loved ones in hospital. It's so therapeutic. It makes everybody better. The relatives, the patients, the staff. It's part of medicine. It's part of the healing process. Whatever's wrong with you, you want to have people you care for and that care for you around you. And as you say, the touch of a hand is far more powerful medicine than some of the drugs we give.
And Carol, why can't NHS England enforce this policy on trusts?
I've been to the head offices in Elephant and Castle in South London of NHS England, and you see the chairman's room, the chief executive's room, and a whole raft of administration. It's like being in a signal box where you've got the levers, but they're not connected anywhere. So nothing actually happens. It's a sort of semi-autonomous republic out there in the various trusts. And I think what we've got to do over this is get very senior ministerial level edicts to stop it. And until we get that, just as we had when we got into this game on the 23rd of March in 2020, we suddenly got into this, everyone agreed. But getting out is much more subtle and much more difficult and challenging. And this is just so important that we return to a sense of normality. The only other place you see the COVID theatre now, I went to church on Easter Sunday, believe it or not. I don't go very often, I'm not a very good Christian, but I was amazed at the COVID theatre going on there. It was ridiculous. And people with visors, masks, disinfectant, dipping the bread into the wine, not touching, no touch technique. It was bizarre to see that the last places you find the COVID theatre are in churches and in hospitals.
Carol, we need to appeal to the humanity of these NHS executives, don't we? And the hospital trusts that are doing this. Can't they just imagine for 1 second, Carol, that it was their mother, their father, their daughter, their son, their husband, their wife going through the darkest days of their lives on their own in hospital? We have to start appealing to humanity again to change these rules.
I think humanity on one side and consumerism on the other. In other words, the patient is the consumer, he or she is the customer of the NHS, and they have certain rights too as customers. And I think the same with care homes. Care homes went through the same sort of charade and are still doing it, of course. And it's the same principle. Caring for older people requires them knowing who's coming to see them, their loved ones have to come and so on. And the biggest tragedy, Dan, was during the height of the pandemic. People dying without being able to say goodbye except through an iPad or a mobile phone. That just
unforgivable.
Go wrong.
It is unforgivable, and people will live with that for the rest of their lives. But the fact that some of these policies are still in place now, no, there is no excuse. Carol Sikora, a voice of reason as ever. Our positive professor will speak next week. Carol, thank you so much. But coming up, as sleaze grips Westminster, is forcing the Tory party to become 50% female really the right answer? My superstar panel return to debate that at 10. But next, has MSM brainwashing over COVID got so bad that we can't question government policies anymore? Neil Oliver presents the clip that sums up everything. He's the outsider, straight after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle, and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. A first look at tomorrow's newspaper front pages in just a moment, but Neil Oliver is tonight's Outsider first. Now, back in February, we launched the lockdown inquiry here on this show so that there would be a proper investigation after millions of ordinary people's lives were destroyed by the draconian government measures. And last week, on BBC Question Time, one intelligent audience member made the mistake of trying to provoke the same discussion on the mainstream media. He was despicably heckled in response. Look out in particular for the two haughty women in the row behind, cackling away to themselves.
I think what it shows that by Boris Johnson breaking the rules was that they were absurd in the first place, and that we should never have gone into lockdown. And that it was the biggest mistake, I think, that the government has made, because we now have a mental health crisis, we now have children who have to catch up on their lost learning, and we have NHS backlogs of over 6 million people. And we have cancer patients who can't get seen, who died during lockdown. No one talks about that. Why are we not talking about the collateral damage from 2 years of lockdowns, which have destroyed the economy and which have caused the cost of living crisis that's happened today?
Now, I actually personally feel sorry for those women because they've been so brainwashed by the mainstream media that they're actually laughing at sound and reasoned arguments about the collateral damages of lockdown. It's been shows like Question Time which brought this man on, I suspect, knowing exactly the treatment he would get, despite being the lone voice of COVID reason in the room, that have conditioned its audiences to treat debate and nuance with contempt, dismissed anti-lockdown voices as crackpots, pushed the government to adopt harder and longer COVID restrictions, only to move as soon as a juicier story emerged without a care as to the lingering effects of their scaremongering. Well, Neil Oliver, what do you make of it all?
I would say, first of all, that I thought that young chap on Question Time was incredibly brave. I mean, whatever the circumstances were of him appearing in that audience, he was extremely strong-willed to come out and say what he said. And, you know, I would have given him a rousing round of applause had I been able to do so. And yes, as you said, the reaction from, well, the audience members that you could see, it was quite bizarre and very disheartening. But I think, yes, it was just a demonstration of the fact that I suppose once people become, as it were, complicit in something as big as the consequences of lockdown, it would be very, very difficult for many people to admit to themselves that they were duped. You know, they do say that it's easier to fool someone than to persuade someone that they have in fact been fooled. It's very difficult to move back, to row back. Once you've gone so far in accepting something, it's very difficult to row back on it. And I suppose it's understandable that people want to hang on to the belief that they were right to do what they did because they were told to do it, after all, by people and by media organisations that they had hitherto trusted. And you're right also that it seemed sometimes that some of the media was pushing for something much more draconian even than the government and the scientists at times, as though the tail was wagging the dog. I mean, we can all remember not so very long ago very familiar faces in the mainstream media, demanding that people suck it up and insisting that it was just one Christmas, and if you couldn't go and visit your loved ones, too bad, it just had to be put up with, which was an even stronger line sometimes than was being pushed by the government itself. Because sections of the media seemed to pick up on the momentum and drive it even faster than it was going anyway. And we all know as well that there were nudge units in place, the so-called behavioural insights units,
yes.
that were using psychologists. They were very well funded. They had limitless access to the media to push the mass of the population in the direction that was desired by some of the scientists, by government departments. That was the message coming out was so constant, so incessant and insistent that it took strong will to resist it. And so, yes, people have been successfully brainwashed, and I think we see that. The Professor Carol Sikora, they're talking about the continuation of what we describe as COVID theatre, continuing to wear the masks. You still see people driving their cars with masks on, walking in the countryside with masks on. The brainwashing is plain to see, and the media absolutely were more than complicit in driving it.
Well, indeed, Carol, and I think that's what was so shocking to me, to see those two women cackling in the way that they did. I do feel deep sympathy for them, because the fact that you would actually laugh at someone talking about the collateral damage of lockdown, when we literally see the collateral damage of lockdown spiking up in the news every single day. It's extraordinary.
Everyone's admitting it now. Everyone's admitting it now. There are reports coming in from the most trusted authorities saying that children have been severely impacted. There's development has been compromised, education has been compromised, mental, physical health, financial consequences of lockdown. Even I have spoken off the record to very senior government figures who have conceded that this will go down as one of the greatest public policy mistakes, in a lifetime. I have had that said to me by very senior figures, and yet still out in the general population, there's this determination to hold on to the idea that lockdown was right.
Indeed, Neil. Indeed. And it wasn't right, and we know that. But I think people should at least be able to question the narrative. And the fact that that isn't happening on shows like Question Time even now, it's astonishing to me.
I think what it's important to think about is the necessity for other channels, and I count GBNews in that, but in the world of new media, there's limitless potential really for other means by which information can go out there. What we need are new apps, new channels, new platforms, as many as possible, to create new arenas where people can come together and exchange points of view that are away from the mainstream. And the potential is there for open source, decentralized means of circulating content, probably perhaps using blockchain distributed ledger technology such as protects the cryptocurrencies from being interfered with, hacked, centralized. We have to take advantage of creating new means by which information can be shared, because if the legacy media and the traditional means of sharing information have been sort of colonized by a calcified, ossifying group that brooks no dissent, that they're just trotting out an orthodoxy, a one-track minded version of events, then it's beholden upon the rest of us to seek out other ways of speaking to one another and sharing ideas. And the technology is there to let that happen.
Fascinating stuff. Neil Oliver, thank you so much. Neil, we'll speak next week.
Thanks, Dan.
It's 10 p.m. I'm Dan Wootton. Tonight, as Westminster sleaze continues to dominate the headlines, is positive discrimination to make the Tory party 50% female really the correct solution? I'll get into that next with my superstar panel, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the broadcaster and campaigner Laladi Downey. How could ITV claim to be kind after kicking one of its most loyal stars to the curb with COVID on the horizon as part of their woke takeover? Dancing on Ice's brutally honest judge Jason Gardner tells how that behind-the-scenes toxicity inspired him to leave society behind as the pandemic took hold. He's taking aim at the TV and medical elite at 10:20. As a Singaporean dancer is cast as the Queen by Jubilee organisers, has colourblind casting gone too far? The great Constantine Kissin is uncancelled on that at 10:40. And as he marks 25 years since this moment... Will Tony Blair's back in an official ad help or hinder Keir Starmer? And karma comes back to bite little Miss Woke Meghan as she's cancelled by Netflix. Those stories and more coming up in the Media Buzz at 10:30. Plus, we'll have your first look at tomorrow's newspapers next and throughout the next hour. And a billionaire battles David Brent in the first Greatest Britain and Union Jackass coronation of the week. But before all of that, the news headlines at 10 now with Polly Middlehurst.
At least 300 people have been intercepted on 9 small boats in the English Channel so far today. Yesterday, the Ministry of Defence confirmed 254 people arrived in 7 small boats. It follows 11 days without crossings, with strong winds and choppy seas believed to have been a factor. A survey of asylum seekers in northern France by the charity Care for Calais has found 3/4 of refugees would still try to reach the UK, despite the possibility they could be sent on to Rwanda. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, says an international coordinated criminal response is now needed to tackle the problem.
Worked on international criminal organisations before when I was Director of Public Prosecutions. I know what can be done if you've got teams working together across Europe, all the way along those routes, absolutely bearing down on these criminal gangs and working very closely with the French authorities as well.
Well, in news away from home, the port city of Odessa in southwestern Ukraine has been hit by a rocket strike, causing deaths and injuries, according to its local governor. Meanwhile, a Ukrainian fighter says civilians still remain trapped in a steel plant in the besieged southern port city of Mariupol, despite some being evacuated yesterday. Officials also say Russian forces have resumed heavy shelling of the area, which continued after buses carrying the evacuees left. Mariupol resident Elisa says she's relieved to have made it out.
It was a risk. It was a risk, but they wanted to get from Mariupol, so we decided that it's worth it. And I have other relatives still in Mariupol. Perhaps my uncle is in Azovstal. He is in the forces, so I don't know where he is still. So we are waiting.
Meanwhile, Ukraine's Navy has released footage of what it claims shows a drone strike hitting 2 Russian high-speed patrol boats. The Raptor-class boats are said to have been destroyed at dawn near Snake Island in the Black Sea. Moscow hasn't yet responded to the claim, and GBNews can't yet independently verify that video. One of Britain's most wanted men has been arrested after trying to fly to Portugal using a fraudulent passport. Alex Mail from Weston-super-Mare in Somerset is accused of drug trafficking and money laundering. He's been on the run since December 2020, when he skipped bail and fled to Spain. The National Crime Agency says he was detained at Lisbon Airport on Saturday after arriving on a flight from Turkey, where he'd been refused entry. The Prime Minister's considering giving housing association tenants the right to buy homes they currently rent. The Telegraph newspaper reports that Boris Johnson has asked officials to draw up plans to help young people struggling to get onto the property ladder in England. On TV, online and on your radio via DAB+, you're with GB News. Now it's time for more Dan Wootton Tonight.
Tomorrow's News Tonight now on our Media Buzz. The first front pages are here. Let's get to them. We'll kick off with the Yorkshire Post tonight, I think, which leads on the Foreign Secretary's comment that the focus of voters is on local issues ahead of this week's local elections. Government Minister Liz Truss, the Foreign Secretary, of course, maintained she was more concerned about fixing roads than dealing with Tory sleaze during a visit to Leeds earlier today. It's the fail of the century, leads the Metro, clever headline. The paper reports that the Queen was put in danger by a blundering Royal Guardsman who let a stalker infiltrate their barracks beside Windsor Castle last week. The Ministry of Defence has also reportedly opened a probe into how the intruder was allowed to spend almost 16 hours with the troops. My superstar panel. Back with me now, the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butterworth, and the broadcaster and campaigner Leilani Dowding. Well, with Tory MP Neil Parish falling on his sword over the Porn in Parliament scandal, the sleaze-hit Conservatives have responded by pledging to achieve a 50-50 split of male to female MPs at the next general election. Needing a quick solution to the Parish controversy, which the disgraced politician partly attributed to a mishap while Googling tractors, Conservative Party chairman Oliver Dowden said, "I think the single best thing I can do as chairman of the Conservative Party is make sure that we select more good female members of Parliament so that the membership of the Conservative Party reflects the wider country." Now, this so-called positive discrimination promise came amid calls for a woman to replace Parish after he resigned for what he called a moment of madness in the Commons. According to Caroline Noakes, chair of the Equalities Committee, doing so would allow the Tories to display a, quote, real evidence of change when it came to equality. But Leilani Dowding, is positive discrimination ever really the answer?
I'm totally against positive discrimination, whether it's sex, sexuality, race, whatever it is. And I think actually it will eventually be more harmful long term. It diminishes people's education or their experience, because then you think, oh, did you just get the job because you're Asian or you're black or you're gay or you're a woman? So I definitely don't think you should be choosing anybody to be representing the population just based on the fact that she's a female.
Do you love positive discrimination, Benjamin Butterworth?
Well, I mean, I don't think it really is discrimination. I wouldn't use that word. I mean, look, you've got
factually, that's what positive discrimination is.
You've got a situation here where this Neil Parish guy, you know, you've got so many examples of male Tory MPs who are suspended at the moment. Clearly, that is a party, and it's not unique to the Tories by any means, but it has a problem with the attitude of men. And if they're running that party and making the decisions about who gets elected, then you can well see that talented, confident, capable women are going to come up against a brick wall that they don't deserve.
Well, as we spoke about it at the top of the show, Angela Rayner is using the term Ginger G to describe her intimate parts on the balcony of Westminster. I mean, that's hardly appropriate, is it, Benjamin? And she's a woman.
I mean, I'm glad I've already had my dinner before I heard that, because it'd be straight back up.
I'm not using the word, am I?
Took me a while to work out what it was, actually.
Look,
me too. You know, that's how naive we are.
I'm absolutely certain that there are plenty of women who support the Conservative Party who are far more capable than Big Pharma boy Neil Parish.
That's not the point, Benjamin. The point is, do you believe in positive discrimination?
Yes, absolutely.
Where there have to be all-female shortlists. Carol, you don't.
No, I really don't. I think what Oliver Dowding said is it's absurd overreaction to Neil Parish. But if we're talking about positive discrimination generally, no, I hate and abhor it. I think it's insulting to anyone who is going for a job. You diminish them. And I also think that, you know, you've got to have the best person for the job. It should be based on skills, not gender. And if you base it on anything else, you're going to cause more resentment than you're trying to cure. And I think, you know, for most... I was listening to what she called Caroline Noakes last week, going on about saying how all this is going to put women off going into Parliament. I'm sorry, but if Neil Parish looking at porn in Parliament, which was awful, but if that puts women going off into politics, well, they're not going to make it once they get there. Politics is a dirty, tough business, and the women who go into it have got to be tough. And, Noakes also said, she said, the women in Parliament are tolerated rather than valued, which is absolute tosh. Women make up a third of all MPs, and that's I think that's 225 women MPs. That's more than there's been for years. We've had 2 women.
Foreign Secretary, Home Secretary,
that's because of the Labour Party.
We've had
female Prime Ministers.
We've never had a female Labour Prime Minister. But
Indeed.
anyway, we've had 2 women.
Never even had a leader.
No,
never even had a female leader of the Labour Party. That's a disgrace on your party.
It is a disgrace, yeah, absolutely. And, there are women that have clearly been capable of that role.
So the Tories are
promoted.
Actually less sexist than Labour, would you agree?
Well, no, frankly, because, look...
Well, then why have you never had a Labour female leader?
Yeah.
Well, it's one particular measurement, and it's a bad measurement because, it's not acceptable that Labour's never had a woman when it's had plenty of capable women. That's a perfectly legitimate criticism.
Lalani?
I think they hate it because they have women on there like Angela Rayner, who just basically creates scandals and makes up stories like you'd expect from Katie Price or a reality
So you
star.
actually think she's doing a disservice
She's doing a huge disservice to women. She's embarrassment. She's made a fool of every single person that's come out and stood up for her.
But you'd never say that about men, would you? You'd never say that Neil Parish is doing a disservice to men.
Well,
you'd just think about that individual man.
I absolutely would say, Carol, I think Neil Parish has done a disservice to men. With his actions. I think he has.
Yes, I think he has done a disservice to men. But if he puts women going off into politics, they shouldn't be there. They need to be tougher than
But why should women have to put up with things like that?
We should never judge an entire sex or an entire race or an entire sexuality off the actions of one person.
Yeah, that's what I just said.
It's not. This is an absurd overreaction. And when to push women into positions of power who maybe shouldn't be there because they're.
But
not
it's
good.
the reverse that
is
happens.
Entirely wrong.
It's the reverse that happens. If we lived in
on the basis of the colour of someone's skin, if you give positive discrimination, that's wrong.
But that's what Benjamin's all about.
But if we lived in a society that was genuinely meritocratic, then I suspect the country wouldn't have been run and business wouldn't have been run almost exclusively by straight white men for the past 200 years. Because I don't believe that those were the only people that were capable and confident enough to do all of these big jobs. It's a nonsense. People aren't meritocratic. People appoint people in all sorts of walks of lives, whether it's journalism or politics.
But you didn't want to hear what Carol said.
So you actually think...
Exactly.
Based on having people like
because it doesn't fit us now.
So you actually think that it's better that somebody... Is it better that somebody who's less qualified or less experienced gets a job because they're...
But that's exactly what happens. People who are less qualified and less experienced get jobs because they're straight white men, and that's
absolutely not true at all.
Rubbish, believe me, if you're a young straight white male going for a job now
the BBC,
at the BBC,
I'm not.
You're not getting it.
No,
you're not getting it now.
Good.
No, not good.
It is good.
Not if you're the best person for the job, Benjamin.
Because they're probably not the best person for the job. There are so many people who don't get the opportunities who are the best person for the job,
This
and you
type
have
of
to change
identity
the
politics
expectations.
is going to tear this
Positive
country apart.
discrimination means that often you put the wrong person in the wrong job.
I think
that's miserable. It's insulting to them,
Yeah.
and it also they will be resented, and there will be more bias as a result.
The best
Positive discrimination is better than the
always get
discrimination that we have institutionalised in so many areas right now.
Well, look, Ghostbusters legend Bill Murray has been exercising his own demons after revealing why his latest film got shut down. So this is his new flick called Being Mortal, which also stars Seth Rogen and Hustlers actress Keke Palmer. And it was about halfway completed before production was halted last week, and the showbiz veteran was accused of, quote, inappropriate behaviour. Now, Murray has blamed the ever-widening gap between increasingly touchy, woke younger folk, like Benjamin Butterworth, for the controversy, revealing it was a poorly received joke that derailed the entire multi-million-pound project. Look.
But before we do, I'd just like to jump in. You've been in the headlines recently because of a movie you've been working on, Being Mortal. Production was shut down, and this is the first time you're talking. I just wonder what happened.
Well, there's a difference of, we had a difference of opinion. I had a difference of opinion with a woman I'm working with. I did something I thought was funny, and it wasn't taken that way. As of now, we're talking, and we're trying to make peace with each other. I feel like if I don't see that, you know, the world's different than it was when I was a little kid. You know, what I always thought was funny as a little kid isn't necessarily the same as what's funny now.
It's now unclear whether Murray will continue with the film, which was due for release next year and has been directed by Parks and Recreation comedian Aziz Ansari, who was arguably one of the most egregious victims of Me Too after a 2018 account of a consensual sexual encounter sparked accusations that the movement was becoming a witch hunt. Let's hope he believes in second chances. He certainly should. And surprise, surprise, the other victim of a devastating and costly production shutdown is none other than California's Princess Pinocchio, Meghan Markle. Her much-hyped Netflix animation Pearl has been dumped by the streaming giant before it ever had the misfortune of hitting our screens, presumably after production bosses realised breaking the bank for the Queen of Woke would have been the biggest mistake in its history. I can hear the howls of rage and fury emanating from Meghan's Montecito mansion, the crushing realisation that pretending to be a Hollywood Duchess means nothing in the cutthroat world of American TV. As I wrote in a new column for Mail Online about this earlier today, Pearl was meant to be the first major series announced as part of Harry and Meghan's megabucks deal with Netflix, and the likes of Elton John and his husband David Furnish were drafted in to help with the production. But it's lasted about the same time as Meghan's effort with the royal family, all of 2 seconds. And after keeping Spotify waiting in their separate £18 million deal to produce podcasts, the pressure is now on Harry and Meghan to present Netflix with TV shows that will genuinely move the dial, with access to their lives likely to be top of the company's wish list. And Carol Malone, I have to say, this is Schadenfreude, isn't it? Because all of a sudden, Netflix, which is losing money by the day, losing subscribers by the day, they can't sustain a vanity project like this from Netflix.
I mean, I never thought this would work anyway, but Netflix are as much to blame as anyone. They bought the name of these 2 people and expected great things from them. Why? Why did they expect Meghan Markle, who's a second-rate actress in Suits for a lot of years?
She's not a TV executive.
And Harry, who was not much good at anything. He fought, yes, in the war, but after he didn't do much after that. So why would they expect these 2 people who are able to make a cartoon series? What experience do they have? What experience does David Furnish have in making a cartoon series?
None. It's a vanity project.
All these people went into it. Meghan and Harry, particularly, they just wanted money, 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 and now they've realised that they can't deliver.
And Benjamin, this was going to be utter tosh, this programme, and so Netflix all of a sudden says, actually, we're losing money hand over fist. We can't go with this woke tosh.
I mean, look, Meghan Markle wakes up and breathes and you start attacking her. You're completely obsessed.
OK, so you're doing more whataboutery. Why don't you actually deal with what's just happened?
It's not whataboutery. It's completely normal, as you probably know, that programmes that are suggested in early development get dropped if they don't really work.
The first programme announced from this deal worth tens of millions that the whole world was waiting for, hardly. I mean, Lolanda, you have to laugh at imagining Meghan's reaction, because believe me, Meghan and Harry, oh my goodness, when they get bad news, they explode.
Well, she's going to say it's about her race, I'm sure, like she has done with everything else. I mean, it's just ridiculous. That's all that ever comes out of her mouth. And, what happened to her going to America to live this quiet life? You don't go to California to live a quiet life, ever. You go to sell yourself out, really. And all she can do is talk about
getting a heck of a lot quieter, let me tell you. Lilani Downing, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, thank you so much. But coming up 25 years on from his 1997 election victory, will Tony Blair's back in help or hinder Keir Starmer? We'll debate that as the Superstar panel return at 10:30. But first, how can ITV claim to be kind after kicking one of its most loyal stars to the curb? Dancing on Ice's brutally honest judge Jason Gardner opens up about the behind-the-scenes showbiz toxicity that inspired him to swap the rink for the wilderness as the pandemic took hold. He's live with me straight after the break.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel, and we're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News. Welcome back. Now, my next guest was one of ITV's most controversial stars for over a decade as one of reality TV's original Mr. Nasties. Hitting our screens with a bang in 2006 with the launch of Dancing on Ice, Australian choreographer and theatre producer Jason Gardner was the judge everyone wanted to hear from. Let's look at him serving up some of his iconic one-liners.
From the waist up, you're Travolta. From the waist down, it's revolting. It's Olympically bad. Well, Beth, this was a great opportunity for you to show us your fun side, and unfortunately, it appears as though you don't have one. Why are you here? The beginning had all the sensuality of a walrus on ice. If your opinion was still so important,
I would be on the panel.
But as part of ITV's woke takeover, Jason was forced to quit the show in 2019 after a series of poisonous behind-the-scenes rows, including what he calls a traumatic feud with celeb contestant Gemma Collins. Jason was doing what ITV bosses paid him to do, judge, but after The Only Way is Essex star accused him of bullying her, he faced an onslaught of vile online abuse. And the hypocritical Be Kind lovies piled on, and ITV bosses stood by and let it happen, putting Jason in a position where his only option was to leave the show he helped to make a hit. Well, after falling victim to the cancel mob, the pandemic struck and everything changed. Struggling with his mental health during lockdown, the TV favourite made the huge decision to cast off the toxic world of showbiz and go off-grid, setting up home in a tent in Portugal and working as an eco-farmer. And I'm delighted to say he joins me now. Jason Gardner, wow, your life has completely changed. And what I find fascinating is that you say it's actually for the better, even though you're completely out of showbiz.
I tell you, Dan, I mean, with everything that you said rather, dramatically about what happened.
Of course. What else would you expect?
Behind why I left. I mean, I love it. It's so sort of sensational. It's fabulous. I've missed that. But the reality is, mate, I made decisions based on, you're quite right, my mental health. And at the time, we were going through the first lockdown. And if it wasn't for an amazing neighbour of mine, Jennifer, who introduced me to her allotment in Barnes, that's when my life changed, because I started to feel grounded when I was feeling that I was on quicksand and I was sinking very fast. You've got to remember, I've been working since I was 16 professionally, and I'd never not worked. So to be in a situation where I was unable to work, I was unable to keep my company going, I was unable to do all the things that I believed I was born to do. It was great to then find something else that gave me a real insight into what was missing in my life. And a lot of that came down to my connection to nature. And I know you being a Kiwi, it's around us, and I'd forgotten, I've lived in big metropolises most of my life because that's where the entertainment industry sort of thrives. But actually it's going back to the basics where I found my true contentment, because there isn't that pressure.
And it's absolutely fascinating, the journey that you took in lockdown. And of course, you've got some very strong words about the government and the health elite as well. And I do want to come to that in 1 second. But can we just first go back to that departure from ITV? Because, of course, you were one of a number of people, Jason, who were essentially kicked to the curb as this broadcaster went woke. essentially, and embraced this woke ideology. And now, Jason, I mean, you're not here and you're away from it, but it's fascinating. The judges on their new talent shows, which, by the way, are rating about 1/20th of what you used to get on Dancing on Ice at its peak, say,
really?
Actually, the judges on talent shows, they have to be nice. Jason, they have to be nice. It would be completely wrong for a judge on a talent show to say anything critical. And I just thought that summed up the be kind mentality from ITV on screen, but actually off screen, if you don't fit their agenda, they treat you like a piece of dirt, don't they?
Well, look, there is no loyalty in the entertainment industry, you know, especially in television. And I learned that, you know, several times. You know, I haven't been removed off that show and brought back, you know, only once. You know, this was the second time where this has happened. And, you know, you would like to think that people learn from their mistakes, but I don't think ITV does. I think they, you know, like most things, I mean, I think terrestrial television is in a very precarious place at the moment. It doesn't really know what its future looks like, and it must be very difficult for the people that are in charge that aren't sort of keeping up with the Joneses, if you know what I'm talking about, in terms of where people are actually watching and getting their content from. And it's certainly not a lot on terrestrial TV, and certainly not these programs, which I think probably supports why there's those waning figures. I think there's a waning interest in that. You know, it was great, it had its time, but I think, you know, if you're not going to serve up authenticity on these shows, a little bit of it, you know, you don't need everybody authentic on that, because, you know, not everybody can carry it. But I think these shows do rely on somebody kind of keeping it real. And it's interesting when they sort of try and sugarcoat it or dumb it down, people lose interest. So that says more about, you know, what people really want rather than what these executives think people want, which is sometimes completely out of step with the public sentiment.
Indeed. And what I guess it gave you, Jason, though, was the ability to be free and to also speak freely. So as the pandemic hit, you would have seen your former colleagues at ITV swallow the government line, hook, line and sinker, swallow the Ofcom line, hook, line and sinker, don't criticise lockdowns, don't question the vaccine rollout. But all of a sudden, you had your voice on these issues and you started this new life in Portugal, where, as you say, you were completely self-sufficient and close to the land, which I find fascinating for someone who had obviously lived such a showbiz lifestyle. But you were prepared to speak out against what you considered a mainstream media narrative.
Yeah, and I think, look, just to support people in my industry, because I think for a moment, you know, people are forgetting that just because people have a public platform, they don't have to use it in order to be a role model, and they certainly don't have to use it to make political statements, right? And when they do, even if you are quoting people that are very credible, that are epidemiologists or virologists, that have reputations, Nobel Peace Prize winners, all that kind of stuff. You are shot down as the messenger of that narrative if it doesn't stick with the MSM. And so celebrities become very big targets, and you need to have a very thick skin. Now, I've got probably rhinoceros thick skin after what I've
developed that over the years.
I've developed it. You know, I don't, and you're right. Right now, I am in such a more liberated place. I'm not. It doesn't depend on whether or not I stay with ITV, a family viewing show, based on what I say, how many followers I have. It's exhausting. People don't understand the pressure that is on a lot of people to really, you know, play into the brand. You know, it's all about protecting brands, and that's fine. But at the end of the day, there comes a decision that you have to take. Do I protect a brand that isn't loyal to me, or do I protect my mental health?
And so you decided, I'm going to speak out.
I decided that, you know, on things that matter to me, and look, I'm sure you're privy to this, I get messaged a lot by people that are reaching out who are really struggling, who are really suffering because of mandates, regulations, but also things that were imposed upon people that stepped up and did the right thing, who have been injured, who have lost loved ones, who are now living with chronic medical health conditions, but nobody's allowed to give them a voice. They're being silenced within the medical profession. It's like, I can't understand it. We understand it's a trial, but we should be more transparent about what is happening. And because it's a trial, we're not saying they got everything wrong, but we have to acknowledge that there are people that are injured and they are sustaining, some horrific, life-changing conditions like myocarditis, pericarditis. These aren't mild people. Do you know what I mean? This changes your life for the rest of your life. And I think it's doing them a disservice and disrespectful that these people did the right thing and people are not giving them a platform and a voice to say, we exist.
No, I completely understand that, and that's one of the reasons why I hosted Christopher Chope recently, who is really the only MP in all of the UK who is actually demanding an inquiry into vaccine damage. So, what you're saying, yeah, of course they did. That was completely revolting. But so what you're saying, Jason, is there should just be a free debate. You want to put it all on the table. You want people to be able to say what happened to them. Whereas if you look at the mainstream broadcasters, the BBC, ITV, Sky News, they don't do that.
But isn't this how science advances? Through debate, through looking at things that were implemented, because what we knew back then to what we know now is completely different. So applying the science has to change with what we know. But if we are suppressing information like the amount of people that are actually being affected, and because, the 9-page adverse side effects that were released after the rollout, because a Texan judge ruled it, that Pfizer had to release that. It's 9 pages long. This is not a short read. There's 9 pages worth of very serious effects, but nobody's allowed to sort of talk about it or linking it. And it's very interesting on the footy program in Australia, which is massive, the Sunday footy program, they started talking about, for the first time on the panel, which is groundbreaking for that TV show, to do this, but they waged in on it and said, what is going on with our players and why are they falling like flies?
Yeah, I saw that. It was a fascinating.
That's powerful.
No, it is. And look, I'm happy. It's difficult to do, believe me, in this country, but I think it's really important that here on GB News we have the discussion and we hear from both sides and we hear from people who've been personally affected. But Jason, it's so lovely to speak to you because it's great to have, I think, for you to have your voice back and to be talking about these important issues. And I know, obviously, lots of people love hearing it on your social media. So congratulations, Jason.
Thank you so much, Dan. And I applaud you for giving this platform to people. Thank you.
Thank you. That was the former Dancing on Ice judge, Jason Gardner. Now, coming up, has the Jubilee gone woke with a Singaporean dancer playing the Queen in a special celebration event? Well, Konstantin Kisin is uncancelled and here on that shortly. But next, will Blair's backing of Starmer in an official ad help or hinder the Labour leader? We'll debate that next as the Superstar panel return in the Media Buzz. Plus, more of the front pages hot off the press. Don't go anywhere.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
I'm Darren McCaffrey and join me on The Briefing Monday to Thursday at 3 p.m. You'll get your afternoon fix of all the latest political stories, debate and analysis, as well as interviews with some of the biggest names in UK politics.
It's a problem that affects the whole world, Darren.
From Westminster to Cardiff, Edinburgh and Belfast, if it's happening in UK politics, we've got it covered. That's The Briefing with me, Darren McCaffrey, Monday to Thursday, 3 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Liam Halligan. Join me every weekday at 1 p.m. for On the Money, your daily dose of economics, business and consumer news. I got 25 years experience covering economics and finance. We hold grown-up discussions with a host of experts who really know their stuff. We can't buy gas and store it. That was a mistake, wasn't it? I think it was a mistake.
Even you, Liam, don't have a crystal ball.
Inflation's a real threat. Every weekday at 1, you're On the Money.
My name's Tom Harwood, and every weekday we bring you The Briefing live from 9:30 a.m. The stories, analysis and live debate that you need to hear.
Quite right, Tom, of course.
Was this something that had been considered at all?
Difficult to answer.
Gas-guzzling helicopters circling. Noise is being made here. Joe Biden walking out. Thank you very much for joining us. Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, Monday to Friday, 9:30 a.m. on GB News.
Back to tomorrow's news tonight now on Our Media Buzz. Lots of front pages and let's get to them. The Guardian claims Priti Patel will face mass legal action from Ukrainians stuck in a visa backlog who are trying to get to Britain. Campaigners have accused the, quote, chaotic scheme of adding trauma to refugees fleeing war. The Independent also sticks with the story, reporting that thousands of Ukrainian refugees have been hit by a dysfunctional system. The paper says many have been forced to live in overcrowded accommodation with families sharing single rooms. The Daily Mail is asking, where have our GPs gone? The paper reveals that due to NHS staff shortages, there is currently only one doctor for every 2,200 patients. It reports that despite an extra 3.1 million patients having been registered since June 2017, the number of doctors has actually fallen by over 1,300 in the same period. And the figures come after the NHS revealed that some GPs are rushing through a fifth of appointments in 5 minutes or less. And this has caught my eye. Cannot believe it. I love this woman. Anne Robinson has revealed in an exclusive interview with the paper that she is stepping away from her £500,000 a year countdown host job after 1 year amid rumours of rift with Rachel Riley for being too loud on set. But Robinson has claimed she only ever intended on hosting for a year. Honestly, that is a huge loss to that show. Adore Anne Robinson. She spiked it up. The Daily Telegraph carries inspirational quotes from Boris Johnson, who will channel Winston Churchill to declare Ukraine is ready for its finest hour in its battle against Russia. The PM will reveal a £300 million care package of military kit for the war-torn country in an address to Kiev's parliament. That's tomorrow morning. And The Times reports spiralling inflation will blow a £7,000 hole in pensions. Brits who worked in the private sector will suffer because of a cap on increases, means their scheme will not keep pace with price rises. Elsewhere, the paper carries an investigation into crumbling and filthy NHS hospitals that are putting patient lives at risk. And The Mirror now, Maddie, prime suspect, is a danger to society. A court has slammed the door on Christian Bruckner's hopes of parole. He's currently serving a 7-year jail term for raping a pensioner in Praia de Luz, the Portuguese resort from which Madeline disappeared in 2007. Can you believe 15 years now since her disappearance? More on the Media Buzz now. Tonight's superstar panel are back. It's the Daily Express columnist Carol Malone, senior reporter at the newspaper Benjamin Butworth, and the broadcaster and campaigner Lelani Dowding. Now, it's been exactly 25 years since this happened.
It shall be a government rooted in strong values, the values of justice and progress and community, the values that have guided me all my political life, but a government ready with the courage to embrace the new ideas necessary to make those values live again for today's world.
Yes, on the 2nd of May 1997, the victorious Tony Blair, who had returned Labour to power for the first time in 18 years, stood on the steps of Downing Street and trumpeted his strong values. That took a few more years to discover that it was George W. Bush he valued above all else, resulting in him sending 179 Brits to their deaths in Iraq with the help of a dodgy dossier. Blair has a complicated legacy, to say the least, as made clear by the reaction to his knighthood. In the New Year's honours list, almost 1.2 million people signed a petition to have the title revoked. So is it perhaps surprising that Labour felt the need to wheel Blair out to endorse Starmer at a time when the current top dog is already managing to attract plenty of negative press by himself?
The day after 4 defeats, just as in 1997, we have new leadership and a renewed sense of purpose and mission. Keir Starmer has shown strength, determination and intelligence in setting Labour back on a winning path. He knows a Labour Party true to its principles is a Labour Party dedicated to winning power, to change our country again for the better.
Well, under Blair, the Labour motto was things can only get better, but I'm not sure right now that they could get much worse. Benjamin Butterworth, I know you're a Blair fanboy, but this ain't going to help Starmer.
Well, Tony Blair is the most successful Prime Minister at the ballot box that we've had since World War II by a mile. You know, you talk about Boris Johnson's apparent great victory. Well, it's about half the majority that Tony Blair won on his third time going. You know, this is a man that got far more votes than Margaret Thatcher ever got. And there are a lot of people, the silent majority, you might say, who support Tony Blair, who know that he did a lot of good domestically, who voted for him 3 times. And I think it's good to see the Labour Party embracing its successes and the successes of people like its former Prime Minister, Tony Blair.
Why are you talking about a guy who actually led Labour to electoral oblivion? You're talking about when he got elected. And yes,
nonsense.
I remember that night and was dancing in the streets. However, by the 3rd term, you know, after Iraq, there are people alive today who you mention Tony Blair's name, they will never, never forgive him for what he did in Iraq. He misled Parliament, he misled the entire country, he didn't listen to the country. You know,
the country voted for him after the Iraq War and in considerable numbers.
And whatever you say about how he helped this country, his governments did nothing for the working class people in the north and the Midlands.
Completely wrong.
This is not completely wrong. He did nothing for those communities that would have been devastated by Thatcher. So I'm sorry, you know, his record, I would say he was the one who created the kind of elitist London West.
Lilani, how do you view Tony Blair?
I can't stand him. He's a war criminal, and basically, he led millions of people, innocent Iraqis, to their deaths as well. It was an absolute catastrophe what happened over there. He shouldn't be involved in politics at all. Anything to do with policy, he shouldn't be involved with any of it.
Final word, Benjamin.
The truth is, you hate Tony Blair because Tony Blair defeated the Little Englander fear-mongering attitudes.
No.
Labour has not recovered since his 3rd term. They have not recovered.
And he's also responsible for destroying the NHS as well.
Excuse me, that's completely... In 2010, when Labour left government, NHS approval ratings were the highest they've ever been. School results were the highest they'd ever been. More people going to university than ever before. The longest period of economic growth in...
He gave away private...
Only Prime Minister to have had every consecutive quarter of their 10 years in power the economic growth. This is a man who transformed this country, someone who transformed the social attitudes so that you had more women in power, you had the first black person in the cabinet, you had gay rights to protect people.
His private financial initiatives...
He disgraced the Labour Party. He ripped the Labour Party.
The British
it has
people,
never recovered.
The British people voted for Tony Blair in the 3rd term in greater numbers than they voted for Boris Johnson in 2019.
And also what he did
Why can't you accept that?
What he did after power as well. His money-grubbing activities after he left.
Very good point. Very good point. Now, amid the threat of a long overdue reckoning, courtesy of Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries, Channel 4 News set out to prove they were not blatantly biased by hosting a completely impartial and level-headed debate about the sale of Channel 4. Campaigning newsreader Krishnan Gurimurthy hosted a discussion on the planned privatisation of the broadcaster with former Channel 5 Chief Executive David Elstein, who backs the sale, as well as Fat Friends creator Kay Mellor, who branded the sale a tragedy. Guess who he gave a harder time?
Channel 4 spends about £400 million on independent production. Under this plan of the government, that would probably go down to about 100 million. That's an awful lot of money going out of British business. Why on earth would you support that?
Those figures are complete nonsense.
The better version you're talking about will be probably American-owned, and they'll put a load of content by producers that they already own on Channel 4. So they won't be commissioning people, you know, based in cities like Leeds, where a lot of production companies depend on public service commissions.
Completely untrue. I'm sorry, Christian. You just don't understand what's going on at all. Ideally, what we will see...
Well, Channel 4's purpose is to broadcast minority views, and yours is one of them, so that's why you're on. But
OK, well, let me give you the facts, because I've probably studied this subject rather more than most people over a 40-year period. Leeds would actually become the real main office, as opposed to the oddly titled national headquarters. We would see a significant reduction in overall staff, but a significant increase.
Let me bring in a producer who's actually based here in Leeds.
Yep, Krishnan dedicated around 5 minutes of the 7-minute exchange to challenging David there on the benefits of Channel 4 staying public, despite being repeatedly told he was talking nonsense. Look, it's clear to me Krishnan has a vested interest. This is his employer and his job is at stake. But that's why Krishnan should have nothing to fear about a reformed Channel 4 in the commercial sector. You'll get to speak your mind, like I do every day, rather than having to keep up this ridiculous pretense of impartiality and neutrality, which clearly was not there in that debate. Now, Lilani Dowding, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, do stand by, because coming up, the crowning moment of the show as I coronate today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. But next, in Uncancelled, as a Singaporean dancer is cast as the Queen by Jubilee organisers, has colourblind casting gone too far? Konstantin Kisin joins me in just a moment after we take a quick look at what's coming up in tomorrow's show.
Coming up on Dan Wootton tonight, have we finally seen the end of the BBC licence fee? Former Culture Secretary John Whittingdale weighs in on whether Nadine Dorries will succeed in taking the Beeb to task. Plus, it's an evening of no-holds-barred opinion from best-selling author Lionel Shriver, Nigel Farage and Darren Grimes. Plus, I'll break down the headlines of the day with my superstar panel. Former Daily Star editor and current columnist Dawn Neeson, Conservative commentator Calvin Robinson and broadcaster Narinder Kaur. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News.
And it's time now for Uncancelled. And this is where Britain's top commentators speak out on controversial issues without the fear of the cancel culture sweeping the rest of the media. Now, preparations are ramping up for the Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations in a month's time, but the momentous occasion has been marred by a diversity hire controversy. It's been revealed that 22-year-old Singaporean dancer Janice Ho will portray Her Majesty in a pageant in a bold move that's intended to show how the head of the Commonwealth is a global icon. Her selection was a result of so-called Bridgerton casting, according to the arts group that created the act. That term refers to the diverse selection of actors in the raunchy Netflix period drama, which prides itself on colour-conscious casting and includes a black Queen of England. The move follows Channel 5's historically inaccurate decision to cast black actress Jodie Turner-Smith as King Henry VIII's second wife Anne Boleyn last year, garnering a furious response from viewers. Well, Konstantin Kisin, host of the Trigonometry podcast, joins me now. Konstantin, great to have you. Would you say this diversity hire is a nonsensical PC fantasy, or can you understand why they're doing it?
No, I think it's brilliant, and I can't wait until Peter Dinklage gets cast as Nelson Mandela. Look, this is a complete nonsense. And of course, you know what's going on here, Dan, don't you? The great American philosopher Eric Hoffer said that every great cause begins as a movement, becomes a business, and eventually degenerates into a racket. And of course, the movement that we're talking about here is this idea of diversity, which started out very legitimately as making sure that people like you and people like me were not being discriminated against, particularly on broadcasting and television and theatre and so on, for the colour of their skin, where they come from, their sexuality and so on. But then, of course, it became a business. And now I'm afraid we're very much in racket territory, where this is being used to do these ridiculous things that I don't think benefit anyone, really.
No, I know, because the thing is, Konstantin, it's not fair, is it? Because you would never have a white actor playing Obama. If someone dared do that, they would be cancelled immediately.
Yeah, and look, I think we've got plenty of movies and parts for people to play wherever they come from. But we're talking about the Queen. We know what the Queen looks like. We know where she comes from. I'm sorry that excludes certain people. It also excludes me from playing the Queen. I'm comfortable with that. So I think we've just got to get back to some common sense here, don't we?
Well, I think we do. I'm not a fan of colourblind casting because, for me, it takes away the accuracy, the historical accuracy of period pieces. And personally, I want things to be as historically accurate as possible, rather than living in a bit of a fantasy world that things from the past were all equal.
Well, quite, and I think it's got to be confusing for younger people and children looking back at these historical things, thinking that, you know, that doesn't actually do justice to the history of this country. And by the way, if you want to talk about accurately covering the discrimination of the past, slavery and so on, it's very difficult to do that if we get this impression that people 400 years ago or whatever were all mixed race and transgender. I don't think that's really going to convey the right picture, is it?
No, it's not. But the fact that it's even gone to the Queen's Jubilee, I think, shows, Constantine, that this is something we're going to have to put up with a hell of a lot more, whether we like it or not.
Well, I don't think so, Dan. I think what will happen, actually, is most people will see how ridiculous this is, and actually there'll probably be a backlash, which I do think is probably not a good thing. And this is my point, is by pushing this so far, you're actually going to alienate a lot of people who otherwise would be quite happy for more diversity, for people to be included. But when you make it so ridiculous, I think what you will actually see is people reacting very strongly against it. So I don't think we will be putting up with this for much longer, if I'm honest with you.
No, and by the way, this is nothing against the young dancer, Janice Ho, is it? Who I'm sure is absolutely brilliant, but she could have a different role. I think for me, Constantine, it's just the hypocrisy. It's not colourblind casting because you know it only applies one way, and that's the issue that I have.
Right, and I think, again, this is the point that we're going to get to, where people start going, well, what about white people, or what about straight people, what about men? And then we're all judging each other by the colours of our skins and our sexualities and our sex. I don't think that's what Martin Luther King wanted for us, is it?
No. It was the opposite of what he wanted. It was the opposite of what John Lennon wanted. And hilariously now, Constantine, if you follow the playbook of Martin Luther King and John Lennon, and that's how I grew up, genuinely believing that we should live in a colourblind world where it didn't matter what anyone's colour was, you're accused of being racist. That's where we've got to.
Quite. And of course, the point I made right at the top about this being a business, we've got to a point where it became a business. We saw, of course, that a couple of years ago with the unconscious bias training, completely scientifically discredited, doesn't work, actually probably makes people angry and a little bit more racist, right? But it was pushed because there are people who now make tens of thousands of pounds from going around selling this garbage to people. And you're going to start to see this in every industry where if you tick the boxes, you're going to get paid. And if you don't, you don't. And as I say, I think it will create a lot of unnecessary resentment, which will actually act counter to the original idea of including people and making sure people aren't being discriminated against. I'm all for making sure people aren't discriminated against, but as you say, it has to be all round.
Indeed. Constantine Kisson, host of the Trigonometry podcast. So great to talk to you. But it's time now to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. My superstar panel are back. Carol Malone, who's your greatest Britain tonight?
Mine's little Charlotte, Wilson Kate's daughter. It's her 7th birthday today. All the papers had gorgeous photographs of her taken by her mum. And I'm glad to say she seems to have inherited Kate's sunny nature and her incredible hair. Thank God she hasn't inherited it.
Benjamin, we've just revealed too early. There's yours.
Kidding.
You were just so desperate to see more of Tony Blair. The greatest Prime Minister this country has
You're
seen
stealing
since
Carol's
World War
thunder
II.
again.
Sir Tony Blair is my greatest Briton. He is the greatest living Briton, not just the greatest Briton today.
Are you joking?
I'm absolutely serious.
So he's a better living Briton than the Queen?
You know, I was against Tony Blair being knighted just because I think he should be king of this nation.
Oh, for goodness!
He should be handing out the knighthoods, not receiving them.
Oh, you will.
Goodness me, check his temperature. The bloke needs psychological help. Lilani Dowding, your greatest Britain nominee.
Britain is Ricky Gervais. He's been back out touring, selling out in minutes, practising new material, poking fun at the woke mob, presumably with very non-PC jokes. So this is what we need, and I'm all about Ricky Gervais.
Oh my goodness, it's definitely what we need. Ricky Gervais, tonight's greatest Britain, unquestionably. Let's move on to Union Jackass, though. Carol Malone, who's your nominee?
Mine is Angela Rayner, the woman who this week was screaming about misogyny and about the leg crossing Sharon Stone story. She put the story into the public domain not once but twice and was laughing about it and then tried to make herself a victim. Also, I want to know why she hasn't yet explained her role in Beergate and why she didn't admit that she was there.
Very good point. Benjamin Butterworth, your Union Jackass nominee.
Mine is Andrew Lloyd Webber, because
why?
The cast of Cinderella found out minutes before they went on stage, and that's one of his shows, that they were being fired, that it was being closed, and some of them learned that Andrew Lloyd Webber's company had sacked them via social media. They weren't even told themselves. That's a pretty rubbish way to deal with actors who've had a really hard
Well, I do agree with that, but can I just stick up for Andrew Lloyd Webber here? He tried so damn hard to get that musical to the stage throughout the pandemic. I blame the government for this, actually, for closing theatres for 2 years. It was always going to have consequences, and Andrew Lloyd Webber tried so hard with that musical, and let's be honest, it's leaped from one disaster to another because of COVID. Leilani Dowding, your Union Jackass nominee.
Mine's Bill Gates, because he's back again, pushing doom and gloom, talking about the next variant while promoting his book, talking about another pandemic, when he's got absolutely zero evidence that the next variant is going to...
I know, and he seemed to say, oh, I don't want to panic people. Oh, but there's going to be another terrible variant. Oh, but there's only a tiny chance of it. Just go away. Let us be free. Couldn't agree more, Leilani. But I'm actually going to go with Carol Malone here, because, of course, Angela Rayner is today's Union Jackass. Her story has crumbled faster than Benjamin Butterworth's cookie. Thank you so much, Benjamin Butterworth, Carol Malone, Leilani Dowding. I'm back again tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Hope you had a fabulous bank holiday Monday. See you tomorrow. Good night.
Looking ahead to tomorrow's weather, and the UK is looking mostly cloudy to start the day, with patchy light rain and a little hill fog. Let's take a look then at the details. It'll be a mild and rather cloudy start to Tuesday across southwest England, but it will be mostly dry. There'll be sunny spells and also a little patchy mist. The southeast will also have a cloudy start with limited bright spells. The cloud thick enough for a little light rain or drizzle. South Wales will start with some bright or sunny spells, but it will be rather cloudy towards the north and east, where there might be some rain. It'll be cloudy and a bit murky in the northwest of England, some patchy hill fog and some light rain or drizzle, but brightening up through the morning. Damp and murky conditions, though, across the northeast of England on Tuesday morning, patchy coastal hill fog and light rain or drizzle at times. And a similar story for southern Scotland, a grey and damp start with low cloud and hill fog lightly, the cloud thick enough for patchy rain and light drizzle. Northern Ireland having a drier start, but it'll also be rather cloudy with the odd bright spell, some patchy mist or fog possible, but dry for most. The cloud breaking in southern areas to sunny spells and scattered showers, remaining cloudy though, with patchy rain in the north. And that's how the weather's shaping up during tomorrow morning.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So